Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at Adobe Substance Painter and how we can apply materials that we've made in Substance Sampler with models, digital models that we've made in either Rhino or Maya or other 3D programs. And in previous videos we've made materials, so this is one that I made for an earlier video in Substance Sampler. And I saved it out. We're going to show how we can bring this into Substance Painter. On the other hand, I showed some techniques in Rhino for making meshes using the shrink wrap tool, and how if we export a single OBJ, use it, but with meshes with different materials, so each of these have a different materials assigned, we can then assign different materials in Substance Painter. So let's go ahead and bring this mesh together with the material that we made here in Substance Sampler. So in Substance Painter, we need to import our mesh. And let's see, I have this mesh on the desktop called Painter Test Object, and I will just use this one and File. Let's see, New. And let's make our document resolution to start with 20 by 48, so that's going to match the texture that we made. Now, if we're working in Maya or other programs and we've gone through the process of unwrapping our objects, giving them UVs, then we don't want to use this auto unwrap. But if we're coming from a program like Rhino, for example, which has actually improved its UV unwrapping tools in the latest version, but let's say if we're in Rhino, we haven't bothered to unwrap it, we can just use this auto unwrap. And we'll be often using the triplanar projection method in Painter, and if we use the triplanar projection method, it matters a lot less, like where our seams are. And so we're going to go ahead and use auto unwrap. We're going to select our mesh now, which was on my desktop somewhere. Where's the desktop? This PC. Desktop, there we are. And I called it, and so if I just start P-Rock, right, I can get to this, and now I can pull and apply this like any other material and substance. So this is cool. Now, what are we seeing here? Number one, if I go back, let me just hide this, and I just want to show a couple of things. One is that if we hit F1, we get to see the unwrapped map. So this is going to be the material, let's see, material 2 is going to be, sorry. So if we look at material 1 and material 2, this must be our sphere, and material 1 is the sky. You can see here that it looks like we have color on this, and this is simply because we have in our environment setting up here this panorama HDRI, which is lighting our scene. And the panorama, wherever it is, here is panorama, is going to have some color to it. Let's grab one like Studio 2 that doesn't have a color, and now you see we only have grayscale here. So I think that's important, just because we don't want to ever, let's say, color our model and get confused by what the color is from our lighting. Okay, so F1 shows both the unwrapped map, and so this was the result of the auto unwrap, and F2 just shows the model. Okay, so now let's turn our P-Rock texture back on. Now you can see that like the essence of texturing is that we have this map, and then we have to apply the texture to the map. And you can see here that we have some very noticeable seams, right? And that's because we're getting noticeable seams at the edges of this unwrap. And the way that this has been unwrapped doesn't really follow the logic of the geometry at all. And so we're getting these moments of harsh seams. So what we can do is change. So this is like the UV coordinates and the UV map for this object. We can see that when we have our fill layer selected here, we're using the UV projection, the UV as our projection type. But there's a completely different type of projection that we can use here called triplanar projection. So when we switch it to that, now you can see that we don't get those harsh seams anymore. So let me go back to UV projection. Let me go to triplanar projection. Okay, cool. And now this is the one that we're going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and hit F2 so we can just focus on our object. Okay, so looking at our object here, this looks pretty good, right? And we could now, you know, if we want more texture, we can increase the tiling, or if we want the texture to the pattern to be smaller, we can increase this number. So at a certain point, obviously, we're going to start to, I mean, what's nice about triplanar is that it's harder to see the repetition of the tile because it's being projected from several different angles. And so we can actually, you know, at a certain point, obviously, we do get that kind of text, that wallpaper effect, but we can actually do quite a lot here, and, you know, playing with the rotation to kind of get rid of that. So, but I would say, like, maybe, you know, if I wanted more texture without it becoming too repetitive, I could use something like 4 here. Now, with the seams, the way it gets around that is it does blur the hardness here at the seam. So if we had like really hard seams, you are going to see seams here. But there is this hardness parameter which we can kind of blend between the multiple projections. So that's how we're kind of getting around that problem of seams with this projection type. And then of course the rotation, we can kind of, you know, we can use this to determine how things are happening, and that's looking pretty good. Now, is one thing we'll notice here is that we have a smooth outline here. So we're not getting any smooth silhouette. So we're not actually getting any displacement from our object. And so what we want to do here to make sure the displacement is we go below display settings up here to the right to shader settings. And here's where we can put our displacement. So first of all, we want to add more tessellation to our object. So let's just pull this up to the max of 32. And then what you'll see is, like, as we start adding scale to this, right, we're getting more displacement. And if we then take the subdivision count down, we're going to see that it's like more low res, and then higher we'll get more details. Now obviously this height is too much, it's really distorting our object, so we kind of have to look and see like what's going to be a good level of texture for this particular object. So here 0.05, and these numbers tend to be pretty low, so you can try like 0.5 is going to be too high, 0.1 might be okay, 0.05 is getting better with the kind of texture. Now, depending on what our final program is, like this could all change, but this gives us some sense of what texture we might want to put on this object. Okay, so now we aren't looking at our sphere at all. We can bring that one back. Let's say we wanted to give this similar texture. And what you'll remember also is that on our, let's look at the material properties here. We have all of these parameters, and I think the quick one that we could play with would be like the hue here, right? So we made all of these, exposed all of these parameters in our material back in Substance Sampler, right? And so we can shift these things. And so what's nice is that we can actually apply I'm going to hit undo to go back to the default. But what we can do is also with our erosion, we can, the erosion intensity, we can kind of play with that. And we can also play with the road color or something like that. Here, can make that one a little darker, it's more eroded. And the erode color intensity, we can actually take that down. Maybe I want to get rid of that altogether, and that will just don't want to mess with that. I do want to, the erode intensity, there we go. So it's highly eroded, not very eroded. Okay, cool. So let's keep the erosion intensity high for this one. Okay, so now we have this looking pretty cool. Now we're still in material 1. If we turn that off, right, we lose this one. Let's go to material 2 and let's go ahead. You can see that there's a layer here. It's not the paint layer. I only see the layer that we've done in material 1 when I'm in that material. Here I can delete that one. Let's go back to our oops, sorry. Don't save it with the name JPEG. Let's save this render. Make a new, where was those tests? These had my sample images in here. So this is fine because I know where this is. So let's, if we want the background, we want to say this is a JPEG. So save this as a JPEG and we'll call it render 1. Now, if we don't want the background, we can save the rendering as a PNG. So we'll call this render 2 PNG. Okay, cool. Now it's not going to be very high res, but we have this. We can also override the viewport resolution if we want to make this a, for example, there we go. Here, if we want to make this a square, for example, we could do like 1920 by 1920 or something like that and get a nice square format for this. You know, we could also rotate around in here if we wanted a different angle, and we could rotate the background. Obviously, the camera, we can up here change this, and if we want, let's say, a flatter image, if we try like 200, something like that, and then zoom in on the object. Nope. We want it to be low. We want a low field of view. Ooh, boy, I'm really messing it up here. Let's change this back to 100. I think F should fit the object. There we go. There we go. F for fit. That's saving me. Okay. So we want this to be flatter. So that is bring our focal length down. We want it to be flatter. We can bring this focal length up. Okay, so it's the focal length that we want to be high. And then if we change that, right, if we hit F, and now this is going to be more like a parallel projection. So sorry I took you on that detour, but if we give this a high number, the focal length, hit F to fit the object, and then kind of zoom out to where we want it, we can get a flatter view, and that looks pretty nice. Okay, so but this is not the one I rendered out. The last thing I'll show you, so we can go into this kind of bonus version of the video here. Let's look at this, and I'll show you some Photoshop techniques. So let's open this with Photoshop, and this is the JPEG. And let's also open this one. Open with Photoshop. Okay, and so now I have this one with the background, I have this one without the background. I'm going to go ahead and paste the one with the background on top of this one and move the layer down. Just locates more quickly. And okay, so some things that you might not know about Photoshop. Now, of course, with our background, if we made a new layer and Shift F5, and we have a white background, so let's use the background color. Shift F5 will fill. Now I move this below. Obviously, I could change the opacity of this layer to make this background brighter. that's something I wanted to do. Now this one, it would be very easy for me to change the color on it. So with the adjustments here, I could apply an adjustment layer to this, hue and saturation, and now, just like in Substance, I could begin changing the color of this object. So that's pretty cool. What I could also do, like for example, oh, now this is changing everything below, right? But what I can do actually is, let me duplicate this layer, okay? And let's just put it down here. If I hit Alt and click in between the layers, now what you'll see is that adjustment layer is only applied to this particular layer. Now I could take, let's say, another color, so this original color, and bring it above. And what's nice is that I could, let's say, I only wanted like this one to change, or maybe I only wanted this one to change, or this one to change, and not this one. Of course, I could come back in here with the eraser, and I could like erase that and be really careful, or use and like get that color back. So let me bring my brush size up, right? So I can keep that one blue. Oops, don't want to do that, right? So getting this whole thing kind of back to that color, which is nice. The other cool thing that I could do, which you might not be aware of, is the way that layer masks work. And so here I have this, the green one now over this blue one, and I could fade between these objects. And the way I could do that is by applying a mask to this one. By default, it doesn't change because it's a white mask. I'm going to make sure that I have the mask selected, and then I'm going to Shift F5. And now the background color is black, so I'm going to use that, hit OK. Okay, now it goes to blue, right? So if I were to then paint a white color in this mask, right, I'm going to reveal the green underneath. So that's pretty cool. The other thing I could do is use a gradient, and I could gradient blend, because the gradient is creating a black and white transition in my object. So I could use this gradient to kind of filter between these objects, and that looks pretty nice. Control H is going to hide where that gradient is. Control H again will reveal it, and by moving this around, I get this really nice kind of color transition here. So oops, hit Control H again, and I think that's looking pretty nice. So I'm going to save it here, and stop the tutorial. But again, yes, layer masks, doing adjustment layers. There are all sorts of adjustment layers. I have this layer selected, adjustment. I could use like a brightness and contrast, or levels, for example. And now that's being applied to that layer. Since I have that one selected, it seems like it's already kind of going just to that layer, and now I could, kind of adjust that one and make it darker if I wanted to, or make it brighter. I could do all sorts of things with this layer. Okay, cool. So adjustment layers are great, masks are great. Definitely play around with those and figure out how they work, because they can really improve your Photoshop workflow. All right, thanks for watching, and have fun.